Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Welcome back to Spanish Lessons with Professor Jason. In today's lesson, I'm going to respond to a question I get fairly frequently, and that is how to express equivalents of to become in Spanish. Now, as with many ideas, we want to translate from one language to another. In this case, there is no one-to-one equivalent that works in all contexts. One of the reasons is that we express many different kinds of meanings with to become in English. For example, we can say things like, Jose became one of the best players in the league. Angelica could become a very good student. His constant complaining became bothersome. They became rich overnight. Shakira became famous in the 1990s or got famous in the 1990s. I decided to become a professor many years ago. When did you become a Catholic? So just on this slide, we can see maybe 2 or 3 different nuances to becoming, sort of a process versus something that happened relatively quickly. I'll come back to those distinctions in a minute. The old airport will become a mall. Fermented sugar becomes alcohol. That issue has become very complicated. Reaching his dream became impossible. The artist became or went crazy. Borges went blind years before his death. My brother became or got angry. She became or got pregnant last fall. He becomes or gets frustrated so easily. Again, so wide range of meanings on this slide, right? From an airport being converted into a mall to somebody's emotional or even physical, right? Going blind, emotional state, getting upset, changing. Okay, different ideas we could express with the verb become or equivalents. And then finally, my parents became or got concerned. Students often become interested in that topic, a process. Obama became president in 2008. Anna became ill last year. These last 3 uses are quite different. Red really becomes you, or that conduct does not become you, it's unbecoming. And then finally, whatever became of David Hasselhoff. Whatever became of David Hasselhoff. What's he up to now? So again, you can see the range of uses we cover in English with the verb become, or forms of the verb become. So, if you really think about what to come means in each of those examples, you'll start to see lots of differences. Another thing to notice is that there are a few common alternatives to using a form of to become in English, depending on the meanings we want to convey. For example, we can become upset, or we can get upset, or get old, or go crazy, etc. Those are just a few variations. Point is, also, Spanish may use a different expression depending on the specific type of becoming we're trying to convey. So look up to become in a really good English-Spanish dictionary and you'll see exactly what I mean. Also, the simple translations for become you might have learned in Spanish classes. I'm talking about things like hacerse, llegar a ser, ponerse, etc. may not always translate as to become in English. So since it'd be impossible to cover all of the equivalents of become in a single session, I'll present some of the most common and useful. Now, I want to give credit where credit's due. In preparing this lesson, I consulted a number of helpful sources. In particular, the online Collins Dictionary at reverso.net, and of course, Gerald Erickson's articles on Spanish at about.com, an excellent, highly recommended source or resource. Now, using those and a couple other sources, I narrowed my list to a few of the most common equivalents of becoming or to become in Spanish. The first thing we're going to do is go back through those examples we just saw, and I'll give you some possible translations in Spanish. You're going to see that in some cases, multiple forms could be used in Spanish to convey the same meaning. So let's take a look. Okay, so to express these first few instances of to become, became, becoming, etc., I'm going to use the expression in Spanish, llegar a ser. So, Jose became one of the best players in the league. José llegó a ser uno de los mejores jugadores de la liga. Angelica could become a very good student. Angélica podría llegar a ser una muy buena alumna. His constant complaining became bothersome. Sus quejas constantes llegaron a ser una molestia. Now I'll talk a little bit later about why I'm using llegar a ser in these cases. Moving on to hacerse. They became rich overnight. Se hicieron ricos de la noche a la mañana, excuse me. Se hicieron ricos de la noche a la mañana. Shakira became or got famous in the 1990s. Shakira se hizo famosa en los años 90. More with hacerse. I decided to become a professor many years ago. Decidí hacerme profesor hace muchos años. When did you become a Catholic? ¿Cuándo te hiciste católico? Let's look at the verbs convertirse or transformarse. The old airport will become a mall. El antiguo aeropuerto se convertirá en centro comercial. Or fermented sugar becomes alcohol. El azúcar fermentado se convierte en alcohol. O el azúcar fermentado se transforma en alcohol. Take a look at the verbs tornarse and volverse, have very similar uses. That issue has become very complicated. Ese asunto se ha tornado muy complicado or se ha vuelto muy complicado. Reaching or achieving his dream became impossible. Realizar su sueño se tornó imposible. Or realizar su sueño se volvió imposible. Again, in a couple minutes I'll explain a little bit of the logic behind these different equivalents. Volverse. The artist became, or the artist went crazy. El artista se volvió loco. Or I could express this with a reflexive verb. El artista se enloqueció. Borges became or went blind years before his death. Borges se volvió ciego antes de su muerte, or se quedó ciego años antes de su muerte. Now I've clustered in this group the verbs ponerse, quedar o quedarse, and some reflexive expressions. My brother became angry, got angry. Mi hermano se puso enojado, or simply reflexive, mi hermano se enojó, se enfadó, they might say in Spain. She became or she got pregnant last fall. You can see these are changes in physical or emotional condition. She got pregnant, became pregnant last fall. Ella quedó, some people might say, se quedó embarazada el otoño pasado. Or simply using a reflexive form, ella se embarazó el otoño pasado. More with ponerse, quedarse, or reflexive. He gets or becomes frustrated so easily. Él se pone frustrado con facilidad o con tanta facilidad. Él se frustra con tanta facilidad. My parents became concerned. Mis padres se quedaron preocupados, or mis padres se preocuparon. Students often become interested in that topic over time, for instance. Los estudiantes a menudo se interesan por ese asunto. And then finally, some other types of expressions that are a little bit different than what we saw in the previous slides. Obama became president in 2008. In Spanish, we would say, Obama asumió la presidencia en el 2008. Ana became ill last year. There's an expression, caer enfermo. Ana cayó enferma el año pasado. If you want to say that something really becomes a person, you can use the expression sentar bien. El rojo realmente te sienta bien, o te sienta muy bien el rojo. That conduct or behavior does not become you. Esa conducta o ese comportamiento no es digno de ti. It's not worthy of you, literally. No es digno de ti. And then to ask whatever became of somebody, right? In this case, whatever became of David Hasselhoff, we're going to use this present perfect construction. ¿Qué ha sido de David Hasselhoff? ¿Qué ha sido de David Hasselhoff? He disappeared. So These are how I might translate these various examples we're using in this lesson. Alright, so far we've clearly established that, number one, the concept of becoming covers a wide range of meanings, and secondly, there are several different ways to express those ideas in Spanish and in English, but we're focusing on their expression in Spanish. Let's review our examples one final time and try to draw some generalizations about when we might use one form or the other. Just keep in mind that when it comes to expressing to become in Spanish, there are lots of overlapping usages, alternatives, and exceptions. So these generalizations are in no way meant to be taken as hard and fast rules. So let's start with llegar a ser. Okay, so we have llegar a ser. Let me just remind you all one more time that everything I'm about to say about these particular expressions and uses is in general. There are exceptions. Okay, so in general, llegar a ser is used to describe a process of development leading up to the achievement of a particular goal or status. So it's used to denotes the passage of time, emphasizes a process and the investment of effort over that time. Examples. José llegó a ser uno de los mejores jugadores de la liga. It took time, but he became one of the best players in the league. Angélica podría llegar a ser una muy buena alumna. With time and effort, she could become. Sus quejas constantes llegaron a ser una molestia. So over time, with repetition, his constant complaints became bothersome. Llegar a ser. How about hacerse? We can use hacerse with an adjective, se hace, se hizo, se hicieron. That use is similar to llegar a ser, but the emphasis is a bit more on the result than on the process. So it might be something that took time, or it might not be, but the emphasis with hacerse tends to be on the result. Se hicieron ricos de la noche a la mañana. Maybe they won the lottery. Se hicieron ricos de la noche a la mañana. Shakira se hizo famosa en los años 90. Doesn't mean she wasn't trying in the 80s, early 90s. It was a process, but I'm talking about when she made it. Se hizo famosa. Hacerse with a noun is used to describe intentional or deliberate change, typically affecting categories of personal identity, things like professions, religions, political affiliations, etc. So as an example, or as examples, decidí hacerme profesor, profession, hace muchos años. ¿Cuándo te hiciste católico? So again, a deliberate choice to convert. Hacer with a noun. Let's take a look again at the verbs convertirse en y transformarse en. The preposition is important, plus a noun. We use these forms to describe transformative changes. That sounds kind of redundant, huh? Transformative changes, but you know, humor me. In form or substance, usually, most often, to refer to objects rather than persons. El antiguo aeropuerto se convertirá en centro comercial. It's actually going to be transformed into a mall. El azúcar fermentado se convierte en alcohol, right? It's actually transformed, right? El azúcar se convierte or se transforma en alcohol. So again, we're going to use these forms when we're talking about things, objects most often, and a change in form or substance. Now, tornarse y volverse, I've put on the same slide because they're pretty similar. Tornarse plus an adjective to describe a change in circumstances, often a negative change, without necessarily attributing a cause or blame to the change. So that matter, that issue has become very complicated. Ese asunto se ha tornado muy complicado. Or realizar su sueño se tornó imposible. Volverse with an adjective we're going to use to describe changes whose nature tends to be involuntary, sudden, unexpected, unpredictable, but these changes are sometimes more profound or serious. So I can still say that issue has become complicated, se ha vuelto muy complicado, but I'm going to use it more often for things like el artista se volvió loco. He went mad, he went crazy. Or Borges se volvió ciego antes de su muerte. You can see that's a more profound, permanent type of change. This brings us to one of the bigger categories, right? And the more flexible categories. So I've lumped together uses of the verb ponerse plus adjective, quedar o quedarse plus adjective, and just simple reflexive verbs. These are all used to describe certain sudden changes, usually in emotional or physical states or condition, right? Sometimes these might be better translated with expressions in English like to get or to go, as in got mad, got upset, or went blind. Okay. Examples. Mi hermano se puso enojado, that's ponerse. Él se pone frustrado con mucha facilidad. Borges quedó o se quedó ciego años antes de su muerte. Mis padres se quedaron preocupados, o quedarse. Ella quedó embarazada el otoño pasado. She got pregnant. Mi hermano se enojó. He got upset. Él se frustra con facilidad. Just now we're into our reflexive verbs, right? So I put them in order on the slide. Ponerse, quedar o quedarse, and now we're looking at some reflexive verbs that also express the idea of a change or a process that we associate sometimes in English with becoming. Se enojó, él se frustra con facilidad, el artista se enloqueció, ella se embarazó instead of quedó embarazada, se embarazó, mis padres se preocuparon y los estudiantes a menudo se interesan por ese asunto. And finally, other types of expressions. Basically, this is just a category for various idiomatic ways of expressing specific types of equivalents of to become in Spanish. Obama asumió la presidencia en el 2008. So here we have a specific verb different than the others, llegar a ser, hacerse, ponerse, quedarse, that will equate to become in this specific instance. Ana cayó enferma el año pasado, expression caer enfermo. El rojo te sienta muy bien, realmente te sienta bien. Red really becomes you, looks good on you, makes you look good. Ese comportamiento no es digno de ti, right? Does not become you. And whatever became or what's become of David Hasselhoff. ¿Qué ha sido? So using that verb ser in the present perfect. ¿Qué ha sido de David Hasselhoff? So if this lesson's taught us anything, I think it's that we need to be pretty careful when trying to express an idea associated with the form of become in English. Since ideas relating to becoming are so resistant to simple translation, this is probably something we're going to struggle with as long as we continue to think in English and try to speak Spanish. Learning to use colloquial features like this one properly really requires prolonged exposure to and practice in the language. So, when in doubt, look up a similar example in a very good dictionary or consult a truly bilingual native speaker. All right, that concludes my presentation on expressing equivalents of to become in Spanish. I hope you found it to be informative and useful. As always, I welcome your questions, comments, and suggestions. So if you've got a moment, please leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about this particular video lesson. Remember, you can find lots more Professor Jason content right here and on my website at professorjason.com. For even more updates, you can follow me on Twitter or like my Facebook page. And I'll put that information up on the screen here in just a moment. Thanks again for watching. This has been Professor Jason, your guide to Spanish. I'll see you at the next lesson. Hasta pronto. Ciao.